You never really forget the first time your child slams a door in your face, not because they're a toddler having a tantrum, but because they're a grown man looking you dead in the eyes and saying something that rips your motherhood in half. Jason stood by the kitchen counter, arms folded, chin high, like he was speaking to a stranger who'd wronged him. "Stop treating me like a child, Mom," he snapped. "I'm not your little boy anymore." I stood frozen near the sink, dish towel still in my hand, the scent of garlic and basil rising from the pasta I'd spent the afternoon making for him. My mouth opened, but the words caught, not because I didn't have something to say, but because I didn't understand how we'd gotten here. How did the same boy who used to run to me with scraped knees now look at me like I was the problem? Just hours earlier, I had been folding his laundry again. Not because he asked, he never did, but because that's what mothers do, right? You find the socks balled up wrong, the shirt he wore on his date crumpled at the bottom of the hamper, and you just fix it. Like always, but Jason had been cold lately, distracted, passive-aggressive. I'd brushed it off, stress maybe, work, the economy, something temporary, until that night. That night he looked at me like I was an intruder in his life. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, setting the towel down. "I didn't mean to make you feel." "No, Mom," he interrupted, walking past me. "You don't get it. You treat me like I'm still 15. You show up unannounced, you text 10 times a day. You act like I can't make decisions without you breathing down my neck." Each word felt like a chisel tapping at a wall I didn't know had even formed between us. I blinked hard. "I'm your mother, Jason. I care, that's all." "Well, stop," he said, grabbing his coat. "I need space, and I need you to treat me like an adult." Then came the words I will never forget. "You're not the center of my life anymore." He didn't yell them. He didn't slam anything. He just said them like he was stating a fact, like announcing the weather. And with that, he walked out the door, leaving me in the silence of my own kitchen, standing next to a pot of now cold pasta meant to remind him of home. That night, I sat on the living room couch, arms wrapped around my own ribs like I had to hold myself in one piece. The TV played some sitcom I wasn't watching, the laugh track cruelly echoing around a room filled with heartbreak. Had I really been that overbearing? I thought back over the last few weeks. I had texted a lot. I had dropped by when I knew he was off work. I'd called when he didn't pick up for 2 days. But isn't that just love? Isn't that what mothers do? I remembered the first time he went to school, how he cried and wouldn't let go of my hand, how I sat in the car afterwards sobbing because for the first time, I realized he wouldn't always need me. I just never thought the rejection would hurt more than the release. Around midnight, I opened my old photo album. There was baby Jason in his high chair, grinning with spaghetti all over his face. Jason in his cap and gown, smiling awkwardly beside me. Jason with a bandaged elbow, eyes tearful, reaching for me after he fell off his bike. I had been there for it all, the scraped knees, the heartbreaks, the birthdays, the breakups, every single moment. I was there, and now I wasn't just unnecessary, I was, in his words, smothering. It wasn't just what he said that broke me, it was the truth in his tone. He meant it. And for the first time, I realized something painful. Maybe I hadn't let him grow up. Maybe I couldn't. The next morning, I didn't text him, I didn't call. I didn't ask how he slept or if he remembered to eat. I just stared at my phone, waiting for a message that never came. At noon, I walked into his room, the same room I'd kept as a shrine since he moved into his apartment. Posters still on the wall, his childhood book still on the shelf. It looked like he'd just left for school, but he hadn't. He'd left me. I took a breath, walked over to the shelf. I picked up the old football trophy he won in 6th grade and held it in my hands like it was some ancient relic from a time I could never go back to. If he wanted space, I'd give him space. If he wanted to be treated like an adult, then maybe I'd stop treating him like my little boy. But the thing no one warns mothers about is this: you can't just switch off your love. There's no dial, no off button. There's just a void where your nurturing instincts used to be, and the ache of holding back everything your heart wants to do. That night, I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the porch, and stared into the dusk. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the lawn where he used to play. I whispered to the wind, "You said you're not my little boy anymore, Jason, so maybe I won't be your mother anymore." And just like that, a chapter quietly closed in my soul. The hardest part about silence is how loud it becomes when you're used to noise. For 27 years, My life had revolved around Jason's needs, his morning chaos, his late-night calls, the sound of his car pulling up in the driveway unexpectedly, his voice echoing from the kitchen asking, "Mom, have you seen my charger?" Now, for the first time in my life, there was nothing, no messages, no calls, no shoes at the door, just the sound of the fridge humming and the floorboards creaking under my lonely footsteps. 3 days had passed since he told me, "Stop treating me like a child," since he walked out with the cold finality of someone cutting a cord that I didn't know was hanging by a thread. And I had listened. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't ask how work was going or remind him to drink enough water in the heat. I let the silence do the speaking, and it said everything I couldn't, but the ache didn't go away on the 4th day. I walked past the calendar pinned beside the fridge and noticed something. Jason's birthday was in a week. My hand hovered above the date, heart torn in two. Every year since he was born, I had baked his favorite cake. Even when he moved out, I kept the tradition. I'd show up at his apartment or invite him here. And he'd roll his eyes but always take a second piece. But this year, I sighed, closed the calendar, walked away. Later that evening, I received a text from my sister Carol. "Everything okay with you and Jason? He seems distant lately." I stared at the message and debated how to respond. How do you explain to someone that motherhood doesn't end in a scream or a fight, it dies quietly, in a moment of decision you never thought you'd have to make? Instead, I replied simply, "We're both adjusting, that's all." But inside, I wasn't adjusting, I was unraveling, trying to figure out who I was outside of being Jason's mother, and the truth was, I didn't know. The next morning, I decided to clean out the guest room. It used to be Jason's when he came to visit. I folded the comforter, picked up the books he left behind, dusted the shelves that had his childhood photos. Then I did something that felt like a betrayal to my own heart. I took the photos down, not because I didn't love him anymore, but because every time I looked at them, I saw a little boy who needed me, a boy who ran to me for every answer, every scraped knee, every broken heart. And the man he had become didn't want that version of me anymore. I put the photos in a box and shoved it under the bed. Around noon, my phone finally buzzed. I jumped. It was Jason. "Hey, you okay?" 3 words, that was it. Not "I miss you," not "let's talk," just a check-in. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back, "I'm okay, hope you are too." Then I turned the phone face down and walked away. It was the first time I didn't initiate conversation with my son, and it felt like trying to breathe underwater. That weekend, Carol invited me over for dinner. Her grandkids ran around the table, spilling juice and arguing over toys. I smiled politely, but my mind was elsewhere. Carol leaned in while pouring tea. "You seem quiet lately." I hesitated, trying to be less of a mother. She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said softly, "Jason asked for space, so I'm giving him exactly what he wants." Carol reached for my hand. "Just be careful, Mags. Sometimes silence teaches, but sometimes it just builds walls." That night, I sat on the porch again, sipping tea that had long gone cold. I thought about what she said. Was I teaching him a lesson? Or was I walling myself off from the one person I loved most? The truth is, I didn't want to punish Jason. I wasn't playing games. I was really trying to give him what he asked for. Adulthood, independence, space. But what no one tells you is that when your child asks you to back off, they rarely understand that it means pulling back your love, your care, your instinct to protect. And I was learning the difference between stepping back and disappearing. A few days later, I got another text. "Can we talk sometime?" There it was, the crack in the door. I stared at the message for a while. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to. I wanted to drop everything and call him and ask him what changed, why now, if he was ready to be my son again, but I didn't. Instead, I wrote, "Whenever you're ready, I'll be here." No expectations, no desperation, just a mother trying to respect her adult son's boundaries while silently hoping he missed her. Later that night, I looked at the box under the bed again. I didn't open it, not yet. But I rested my hand on the lid and whispered something I never thought I'd have to say out loud. "I'm not just your mother, Jason. I'm a woman too, and I'm learning how to be her again. And for the first time in a long while." I cried not because I was hurt, but because I was beginning to understand. Love doesn't disappear, but sometimes it has to be reshaped. I hadn't expected him to show up after weeks of silence, vague text messages and a chasm that felt impossibly wide. I thought I'd mostly moved on. But there he was standing at my front door on a Sunday evening, rain glistening on his coat like guilt clinging to regret. I opened the door without hesitation. "Come in, Jason," he entered, tightening his scarf. The kitchen light flickered on behind me, casting gentle warmth that felt too fragile for what lay ahead. He cleared his throat. "Mom, can we talk?" It wasn't a demand, not exactly. It was more like me calling him for breakfast when he was 6, soft and caring. Old habits die slower in children's hearts than we'd like to admit. I nodded, stepping aside. He sat at the kitchen table, his shoulders tight, eyes exhausted. I poured 2 cups of herbal tea, his favorite lemon balm, and placed one in front of him. We didn't speak right away. I watched his fingers trace the rim of the cup. The steam curled between us. The silence didn't feel empty anymore, not like before. It felt waiting. Finally, he looked up. "I'm sorry, Mom." 2 words, coded in months of regret. Something in my chest softened. But I didn't say anything. He cleared his throat again. "I wasn't ready when you dropped by every evening. I needed space. My own life, my own decisions." I nodded slowly. His voice trembled. "I think I finally realized I was using you, your love, your time, your concern." The room flickered with memory. I thought of the nights I stayed up worrying, checking texts, making lists of what he might need, making dinner, cleaning his apartment. I remembered early mornings when he snuck into my bed after nightmares, and I whispered soothing prayers for him as the dawn came through the windows. I sighed. I thought I was helping. He offered a small, sorrowful smile. "You were for years, but help became habit, and habit became expectation, and expectations suffocate." Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded note. "Mom, if you can forgive me, I'd like to try again being your son, not your responsibility." He placed it on the table. I unfolded it. He had written in his handwriting, careful, honest. "This note is not an apology. I hope you'll forgive quickly. It's not a promise I expect you to trust easily. It's a request, a chance to be your son again. If ever you're ready." Tears pricked my eyes. Tears that weren't sorrow, but release, not of guilt, but of shifting shapes of love. I folded the note carefully, placed it next to my cup. "I don't know where this goes from here," I said softly, "but I believe in intention." He reached across the table and touched my hand, lightly. "Thank you." We sat like that for a while, words unspoken, but a bond being rewired. I finally said, "Let's take small steps." He nodded. In the following days, we began small. He texted to say he'd fixed a leaky faucet in my bathroom. I replied with, "Thanks." I asked if he wanted dinner next week. He said he'd love to, on one condition: I'll cook. He cooked curry in my kitchen one night. I watched him chop onions, lean into aromas I used to measure out. I tasted his food, framed by his apology and gesture woven together. I felt respect, simple, quiet. He did the dishes afterward, not because I asked, just because I no longer live here. One afternoon, I found a plant on the porch. A note tied to the pot: "For your quiet moments, I thought you'd like it." The plant, small, leafy, green, like hope sprouting from careful soil. I watered it, moved it into the sunlight, a living apology. One afternoon later, I found a journal, new, blank. Inside the front flap, his words: "Because you taught me love still grows in writing." The distance between us was still there, but now it felt like space for healing, not punishment. And slowly, I realized something new. I didn't need to erase his childhood to let him grow up, but I did need to stop making his adulthood mean I didn't matter. He called that night. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything." Before dinner, I sighed, smiling a little. "You've done enough. Now just be my son." That night, I stood on the porch again, the same spot where I'd previously traced shadows of regret. But this time, the house inside felt less empty. Maybe because the echo had become the promise of return, not as a role obligation, but as a mutual choice. I whispered to the quiet, "Love changes form, but I still choose us." For weeks after our talk, my house echoed differently. It wasn't empty anymore, it was available. And so was I. After decades of mothering lunchboxes, late night laundry, whispered goodnights, doctor appointments, pep talks, and driving to college dorms, I finally had time, space, silence, but not the kind that hurt, the kind that invited. I stood in front of the mirror one morning, brushing my hair, and thought, when was the last time I did something just for me? Not for Jason, not for my late husband, God rest his soul, not for my sisters or the church group. Me. The Margaret who once loved watercolors and old bookstores, the girl who dreamed of seeing Italy, the woman who used to hum Nina Simone while watering plants barefoot. Where had she gone? I went to the attic that day, a part of the house I hadn't visited in years. Dusty boxes, old jackets, my wedding dress in a yellowing garment bag, but in one corner, behind an old lamp and a set of half-working Christmas lights, I found it, my easel. My watercolors, brushes, a canvas with a half-finished meadow on it likely 30 years old. The paint had cracked like dried dreams. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, staring at it. And then I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I had forgotten I used to love this. The next day, I went to the art supply store. The young girl at the register smiled as she rang up my brushes and a new sketchbook. Starting something new? She asked kindly. I smiled, starting something old, but finally finishing it. She beamed, not realizing she was witnessing a resurrection. That night, I painted for hours. No phone, no distractions, just color, water, paper, and that soft voice inside that said, yes. You are still here. When Jason called 2 days later, he noticed, you sound different. He said, do I? Happier. He added. I smiled. I remembered I'm allowed to have a life too. There was silence on his end. Then carefully, I'm glad. I joined a painting class every Wednesday. A small group of women, mostly retired. We sipped tea, shared stories about aging knees and old love, and painted wildflowers like we were still 25. There was laughter, real, belly-deep laughter I hadn't felt in years, and then came the moment I hadn't expected. I signed up for an exhibit. Nothing fancy, just a local community center display. But when I saw my name printed on the placard under my painting Margaret L. Late Blooms, I almost couldn't breathe, because I realized I was blooming. Not again. For the first time. Jason showed up. Unannounced. He walked in, looked around the little gallery room, and found my painting a soft, moody piece of wildflowers under a stormy sky. I didn't know you could paint like this, he said. Staring at it. You didn't ask, I said softly. He nodded. That's on me. Then, something in his eyes flickered. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was surprise, but it looked like he was seeing me for the first time as someone besides Mom. You're kind of amazing, he said with a grin. I laughed. It only took you 31 years to figure that out. He bumped my shoulder lightly. I'm a slow learner. Later, over coffee, he asked about the painting. What does it mean, late blooms? I thought for a moment, then said, it means there's no deadline on finding yourself again. He looked at me carefully, like he was processing more than just the words. Weeks passed. My calendar slowly filled up with art, book clubs, long walks, and even an online Italian class one took just because I could. Jason called regularly now, but not with emergencies or needs. With updates. Guess what I cooked this week? He'd say. Or, I actually cleaned under the fridge. Sometimes he even asked me how I was. And I could tell he genuinely meant it. One Saturday, we had brunch at a small cafe near the lake. He sipped his coffee and said, it's weird, but I feel like I'm getting to know you again. Good weird or bad weird? I teased. He grinned. The best kind of weird. We sat in silence for a few moments, and then he said, I used to think you were just this, soft landing, always there. I didn't realize how much life you had inside you, how much you gave up for me. I looked at him gently. That's what being a mother means. But it doesn't mean I'm not a woman too. That night, I wrote in my journal, I thought losing my son's dependence would leave me hollow, but it made me whole. The freedom I felt was never about being free from Jason. It was about being free with myself. And maybe, just maybe, that freedom helped him grow too. Not because I pushed, but because I finally stepped back and let him stand, and in doing so, I learned to stand on my own as well. You don't stop being a mother overnight, even when you say you have, even when your son says he wants you to, because sometimes muscle memory wins. And that's exactly what happened the morning Jason showed up at my door with that worn-out duffel bag and a tired face I hadn't seen since his college years. I opened the door, surprised. He didn't say hi. He didn't hug me. He just said, Claire kicked me out. And just like that, the mother instinct fired up like a reflex. Oh honey, I said, pulling him inside. Come in, sit, I'll make coffee. Do you want breakfast? Do you need to rest? He dropped his bag on the floor with a heavy thud and collapsed onto the couch, and just like that, the roles tried to reverse again. Over pancakes and 2 mugs of strong coffee, Jason vented. She says I don't listen, that I shut down. That I act like a teenager when I'm mad. He rolled his eyes. She literally said, "You act like your mom still babies you." Can you believe that? I froze, and there it was, the trigger. The boundary line we had carefully painted just months ago smudged by one careless sentence. Jason didn't even realize what he'd said. But I did. I sat back in my chair, not angry, not even hurt. Just reminded that my job wasn't to comfort him anymore, not like before, not the way he wanted it. "I'm sorry things are rough with Claire," I said gently, "but I want you to hear something." He looked up from his coffee. "What?" "I'm not going to fix this for you." That stopped him. He blinked. "What do you mean?" I took a breath. This was harder than I expected. Old habits have claws. "I mean, I'm here, I love you. But I'm not your fallback, I'm not your emotional sponge. You asked me to stop treating you like a child, and that includes now." He sat in stunned silence. I could see it in his face, that small flare of frustration, the wounded pride. The "how dare you" that used to live in his teenage scowl. "You think I'm just using you?" He asked quietly. "No," I said carefully, "but I think you're used to me softening every fall, and part of becoming a man is learning to land and still get back up." He stayed two nights, no more. He slept on the guest bed, not the couch. We had dinner, light conversation, some laughter, but I didn't ask if he needed help with his rent. I didn't offer advice on his marriage. I didn't call Claire. I didn't cry. And on the 3rd morning, he said, "I think I'm going to go back, try again." I nodded. "That sounds like a good idea." He walked toward the door, then turned. "You really meant it, didn't you? When you said you stopped being my mother." I walked over, touched his arm. Double quotes. "No, I said I stopped mothering you. There's a difference. You'll always be my son, Jason, but you're also a man, and I respect that now, enough to let you handle your own storms." He stood there, quiet, absorbing my words like sunlight. Then he nodded, gave me a quick hug, no clinging, no long goodbye, and left. That night, I stood by the window watching the wind shake the trees in the backyard, and I didn't worry about whether Jason had eaten. I didn't worry about whether he had clean clothes or a safe place to sleep. I let the silence stay. Because it wasn't cold anymore. It was peaceful, it was earned. A few weeks later, Jason called. His voice was steadier, lighter. "Claire and I had a long talk." He said. "I apologized." "We both did." I smiled. "That's wonderful." "Sweetheart." There was a pause. Then, she said, "I've changed, that I'm more grounded, less reactive." He laughed a little, and she asked me what happened. You know what I told her? "What?" I said. "My mom finally let go, so I had to learn how to stand on my own." That moment didn't just make me proud, it made me whole, because, for so many years, I thought loving my child meant holding on. But maybe real love, mature love, is learning when to let go. I went to bed that night and slept deeply. No worries, no guilt, just gratitude. Gratitude for the quiet strength that comes from doing nothing, when nothing is exactly what's needed most. There's a strange kind of silence that enters a house once the last echo of your children fades away. It's not the loud kind of silence, not the screaming emptiness you'd expect. It's subtle, lingering, like a song you can't quite remember the lyrics to, only the feeling it left behind. After Jason left, after our boundary had finally been respected, truly, not just spoken about, I found myself sitting in the quiet and asking, who am I now that no one needs me every day? That morning, I made breakfast for one egg, 2 slices of toast, half a grapefruit. I didn't ask anyone how they wanted theirs cooked. I didn't toast for slices and butter all of them before they got cold. Just mine. It sounds small. Maybe, even foolish to say it changed something in me, but it did. I sat at the table, slowly chewing, and realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't planning my day around anyone else. No doctor's appointments for Jason, no grocery lists built around his favorite cereal, no reminders to iron his work shirts, no mental games of, should I call, should I ask how things are, should I check his mood before I say anything? Just me. I walked around the house barefoot, opened all the windows, played music from a playlist I hadn't touched in a decade. Old love songs, mostly, the kind that used to make me dance in the kitchen when I was young, when the word mother was still just a dream. I looked at the framed photos on the hallway wall. Jason at 5, Jason At 10, Jason at graduation, and I didn't feel regret. Not like before. I didn't ache to go back. I didn't wish I could rewind the clock and do better. I just smiled. He was my boy. I loved him the best I could, but he wasn't a boy anymore. And I wasn't just his mother. Later that day, I opened my journal, the one I hadn't written in since Jason left for college. The first page was dated 12 years ago. The last entry read, "He says he'll be okay, but I'm not sure I will." I wrote underneath it, "I am okay. I am learning who I am without the title of caretaker." In the days that followed, I began to reclaim small corners of my life. I joined a local book club at the library. I was the oldest woman there, and I didn't mind one bit when I shared my thoughts on the book. People actually listened, not because they needed help, not because they were waiting for dinner, but because they valued my voice. Do you know how long it had been since I felt interesting one afternoon? After the book club, I stopped at the cafe across from the park. I ordered a cappuccino and sat alone, watching the breeze stir through the trees. A man at the next table caught my eye, not in a romantic way, not yet at least, but in the way someone notices you when you're fully present in your skin. He raised his cup. "Lovely weather today." I smiled, perfect for sitting and not rushing anywhere. He chuckled. "I forgot what that feels like." "Me too," I replied, "but I'm relearning." We talked. His name was Thomas. Widowed, retired architect, 2 daughters, grandkids he adored. We didn't exchange numbers that day, but something shifted in me again. A realization, life isn't over because I'm no longer needed in the same way. Life was waiting, quietly, patiently, right outside my kitchen window that night. I sat in my armchair and didn't feel alone. I wasn't filling the silence with TV shows I wasn't watching. I wasn't scrolling through social media to see if Jason had posted. I just sat, and it felt good. A few weeks later, Jason called again. "Hey mom, just wanted to check in. See how you're doing." I smiled. "I'm doing really well, sweetheart." There was a pause. "You sound different." "I think I am." He laughed. "Claire said something funny today. She said your mom's glow up is making me jealous." I laughed too. "Well, it was long overdue, you know," he said gently. "I think I needed you to let go, so I could finally step up." His voice had weight in it, depth, and I think, I replied, I needed to let go, so I could finally come back to myself. That's the thing about being a mother. We're told it's forever, and in some ways, it is, but the job part, that part evolves, or it hardens you. You either become bitter from not being needed the same way, or you become better, lighter, fuller, stronger from all you've survived. I chose better, and I think that's when it finally clicked for Jason, too. He didn't just want a mother. He wanted a woman to look up to, not one who lived in fear of being left behind, but one who walked ahead proudly, showing him it's okay to change, to grow, to be more than your role. More than your role. The dining room had always been my sanctuary, the clink of cutlery, the low hum of conversation, the warmth of food shared between loved ones. These were the sounds of home. But tonight, the room was still, silent. The long oak table, polished and set, stared back at me like a solemn witness, and at the far end, the chair where Daniel used to sit empty. I didn't cry, not anymore. Grief had hardened into something dull and heavy, like an iron weight I carried in my chest. It didn't erupt in tears now. It just lingered, quiet and constant. I poked at the roasted chicken, still steaming, perfectly seasoned the way he liked it, but I had no appetite. I had made it out of habit, out of muscle memory, the kind a mother doesn't even realize she has until there's no one left to cook for. 2 weeks had passed since that awful confrontation in the driveway, since Daniel told me, through clenched teeth, that I treated him like a child and made him feel like nothing. Since I told him I wouldn't be his mother anymore if he couldn't respect the one I had been for 30 years, I meant it, or at least, I tried to mean it. But there's no off switch to being a mother. No contract you tear up, no uniform you hang in the closet. You can say the words, you can close the door, but your heart keeps reaching for the child who walked away. I cleared the plates and touched, and poured myself a glass of red wine. The first sip stung, the second went down smoother. The third reminded me of all the holidays we'd sat at this very table, Daniel grinning, telling stories, dipping rolls in gravy, arguing about the best Christmas movies. He used to look at me like I was the anchor in his storm. Now, he looked at me like I was the storm itself. The doorbell rang. I nearly dropped the glass. My heart leapt as I rushed to the door. A breath stuck in my throat. What if, but it wasn't him. It was Janine. Her hair was down, curled, her eyes swollen like she'd been crying in the car. Can I come in? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded and stepped aside. She walked straight to the kitchen, as if on autopilot, and sat at the counter. I followed her. Unsure of what this was, an apology, another lecture, a message from Daniel. I'm not here to fight, she said, her hands shaking as she cupped the mug I poured for her. I needed to talk to someone who knows him like I used to. That hit me hard. He's different lately. She continued, short-tempered, cold. I know. We've had our issues, you and me, but it's not just with you anymore. He's shutting everyone out. I leaned on the other side of the counter. He always carried too much on his shoulders, even as a boy. He tried to fix everything before asking for help. Janine's lips trembled. He won't talk to me. He won't come home some nights, and when he does, he's like someone else. Someone I don't recognize. The silence between us stretched like taut string. I thought if I stayed away, I said softly, he might learn something about space, about gratitude. About the weight of pushing away people who love you, and did. She asked. I shook my head. I don't know. She hesitated. Would you come with me? Just, come see him. Maybe if he sees you, hears you. I stood frozen. My pride screamed no, my love whispered yes. I set my wine glass down. The sound echoing too loud in the quiet kitchen. Let me grab my coat. The apartment Daniel now lived in was far smaller than the house he grew up in, and far colder, stark furniture, unopened mail on the counter, dishes stacked in the sink. Janine unlocked the door with her spare key. I stepped inside slowly, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. He was there sitting on the couch, bottle in hand, eyes bloodshot. When he saw me, he blinked like he didn't believe I was real. What the hell is this? He said. Standing up too fast and knocking over the bottle, Janine stood by the door. She's here because I asked her to be. He scoffed. You think dragging my mother into this is going to solve? I raised my hand. No one dragged me, Daniel. I came because I needed to see what this silence is turning us into. He stared at me, jaw tight, breathing heavy. And then something in him cracked. Why did you stop calling? His voice broke. Why did you actually stop being my mother? I didn't expect that, because, I whispered, walking closer, you told me to. I didn't mean it. Then why did you say it? He sank into the couch, head in his hands. I don't know. He muttered. Everything feels like pressure. You want me to be better. Janine wants me to be present. Work wants me to be perfect, and I'm just failing. I sat beside him, gently, like approaching a frightened animal. You're not failing, Daniel. You're drowning. But the people who love you are reaching out. And you've got to stop swatting our hands away. For the first time in years, I saw the little boy behind his eyes again. The boy who ran to me when his knees bled. The boy who cried when his father left. The boy who only ever wanted to be good enough. I don't know how to fix it, he whispered. I touched his shoulder. You don't have to. Just start by coming home, even if it's just for dinner. Even if it's just to sit in that chair. Again. After that night in Daniel's apartment, something shifted not just in him, but in me, too. He didn't say much as I left. Just a quiet, shaky thank you, Mom, that lingered in my ears the whole drive home. And though it wasn't an apology, it was more than I had heard in months. It was the first pebble in the landslide of something we both needed desperately: reconnection. But reconnecting, it's not a switch, it's not as simple as stepping back into a role, it's a slow, uncomfortable unraveling of years of pride, distance, and unspoken wounds. A few days later, I found myself in the attic. I don't even remember climbing up there. It was like my body moved before my thoughts did. I wandered past dusty boxes labeled Christmas lights and old photos, until I reached the one I didn't even realize I'd been looking for. Inside it were pieces of Daniel's childhood, the crayon drawings he made when he was 5, his first baseball glove, a report card with a note from his 3rd grade teacher. Daniel is bright, but easily discouraged. God, that note cut deep now. At the bottom was a folder I had nearly forgotten, filled with letters I had written over the years. Letters I never sent, letters I wrote when my heart was too heavy to speak, but too full to remain silent. One stood out. The one I wrote the night after he stormed out and told me to stop treating him like a child. It was raw, emotional, unfiltered. I read it slowly, word by word. Dear Daniel, tonight, I realized something terrifying. You don't see me as the mother who held you when you were sick, who stayed up through the night during your exams, who worked a job so you could go to college. You see me as the woman who won't let go of a boy who wants to be a man, and maybe you're right. But what you don't understand is that the instinct to mother doesn't end when your child turns 8. Or 30, it doesn't stop when they get married, or get promoted, or buy their own home. It doesn't even stop when they scream, "I'm not a child anymore." It just stays, quietly, faithfully in the background, waiting for the moment you'll need it again. So, I'll step back, Daniel, I'll give you your space, but I want you to know I was never trying to control you. I was just trying to hold on to the pieces of you I didn't know how to let go of. Maybe that was my mistake, but it came from a place of love. Always. Mommy folded the letter and stared at it for a long time. I had never sent it, afraid perhaps that it would sound like another attempt to pull him back under my wing, but now, I wondered if he needed to read it, maybe not for my sake but for his. To know that everything I had done, every stubborn insistence, every overbearing suggestion was never about control. It was about love, imperfect, messy love. The next day, I slipped the letter into an envelope, wrote his name on the front, and dropped it in his mailbox. No note, no explanation, just my truth. That night I got a call. Mom, his voice was thick, slow. Yes, I got the letter. My breath caught in my throat. Okay, a pause. I didn't know you saw me like that. I thought you never really respected me as a man, that you always saw me as the scared kid you had to save. I did see you as that kid, I said, but I also saw the man. I just didn't know how to step back without feeling like I was abandoning you. Another long silence. But this one didn't feel cold. It felt like healing. I think I needed that letter more than I thought. He said, it made me realize something, that I've been pushing you away, because I was scared you'd see the parts of me that still haven't figured it all out. I closed my eyes. Daniel, no one has it all figured out, not even at my age. He laughed softly. And it was like hearing sunlight. I'm coming over this weekend, he said suddenly. I'll bring dinner, your favorite. I didn't speak at first. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and blinding. Okay, I finally whispered, I'll be here that Saturday. I set the table again. Just like old times, but this time, I didn't set his place at the head of the table like I used to. I didn't treat him like the boy he was. I set it beside mine. Equal, grown, present. When he arrived, he held the food in one hand, and flowers in the other. For you, he said, placing the bouquet in my hands, and for everything I didn't say sooner. And as we sat down to eat, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding on too tightly or letting go too fast. I simply shared a meal with the man my son had become. Time passed after Daniel's visit, not in a dramatic rush, but slowly, like the way seasons change when you're not looking. One day you wake up, and the air smells different, softer. Like something has finally let go. Daniel began visiting every Sunday. At first, it was awkward. We circled around conversations, careful not to fall into old patterns. I resisted the urge to ask about his laundry, his finances, his sleep. He stopped rolling his eyes at my stories. We danced a careful dance of two people trying to become something new to each other. But then, one Sunday, he arrived with someone new. Her name was Claire. He introduced her as his friend. But his eyes gave him away, how they lit up when she spoke, how they lingered on her when she laughed. Claire was kind, gentle, with a warmth that filled the room like a well-placed lamp. And more than anything else, she saw me. She didn't look past me like a formality in Daniel's life. She asked me questions, listened to my answers, offered help without assuming I needed it. That night, as they left, Daniel turned and said, Claire really liked you. I smiled, brushing off the compliment. She's lovely, you've chosen well. She thinks you're strong, he said. She told me she wished she had a mom like you. That stopped me. My chest swelled in a way it hadn't in years, not from pride, but from something gentler, a quiet knowing that maybe, just maybe, the wounds between us were beginning to heal in places we couldn't even see. And yet, the silence that followed in the coming days stirred up old anxieties. Daniel didn't call for 2 weeks. No Sunday visits, no texts, no updates. I fought the urge to pick up the phone and ask what was wrong. I had promised myself not to chase him anymore, but promises made to yourself are the hardest to keep. Then, one evening, I was sitting by the window, watching the sky bleed into night, when there was a knock at the door. It wasn't Daniel. It was Claire. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her hands trembled as she clutched something to her chest. May I come in? She asked. My throat tightened. Of course, dear. Is everything alright? She stepped in, wordless, and sat on the couch like the weight of her body was suddenly too much to carry. I don't know where else to go, she whispered. Daniel. He left. I blinked. Left? What do you mean? She shook her head, her lips wobbling. He got a job offer abroad. He didn't tell me until last night. He said he needed space to figure himself out, that he wasn't ready for the kind of life I wanted. Pain twisted through my chest, not just for her, but for him, for this boy who still didn't know how to hold love without fearing it would trap him. She handed me a small envelope. He asked me to give you this. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Mom, I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person. I knew if I saw your face, I wouldn't be able to leave. Please know this isn't about running away. It's about trying to become the kind of man I can be proud of, not just the son you remember. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I'm grown, but the truth is, I've never stopped being afraid of disappointing you. You were right when you stepped back. I needed that. I needed space to hear my own thoughts. But now, I need distance to see who I really am. I don't know where this road will take me, but I promise you this. I'm not cutting you out. I'm finding my way back, not as your boy, but as someone who knows how to be whole on his own. I love you. Daniele sat with the letter for a long time after Claire left. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat, breathing, remembering. There was a time when I would have driven to the airport, begged him to stay, reminded him that love doesn't have to be earned, that it already existed between us like an invisible thread, but I didn't, because loving someone isn't about holding them back. It's about letting them go and trusting that, if the bond is real, they'll find their way home. It had been 2 years. 2 full years of Sundays that came and went without Daniel's knock at the door. 2 years of unopened photo albums, unread messages I kept drafting and deleting, and unanswered questions that echoed louder in silence. I stayed strong, or at least I pretended to be. My garden became my refuge. I planted lavender, rosemary, daisies, and marigolds, pretending each new bloom was some small sign that letting go was the right thing. Claire and I kept in touch. She moved on, quietly, gracefully. Her life unfolded in a different direction. She sent postcards from different cities, always signing off with, "He'll come back, and he'll be worth the wait." Some part of me believed her, most of me didn't. I aged faster in those 2 years, not just in body, but in spirit. There's something about watching the person you brought into the world disappear that creates a kind of ache deeper than grief. The ache of being left behind by someone still alive. But then, on a cold spring morning, I saw a figure standing at the edge of my garden. I was pulling weeds, hunched and grumbling about my aching knees, when I felt it, the stillness in the air. The kind of stillness you only feel when something important is about to happen. I looked up. And there he was. Daniel. Older. Taller. Different. Yet, somehow, still my son. His hair was longer, his eyes deeper, his hands in his pockets like the boy I once knew. But his posture was different, like a man who had finally lived enough to understand the weight of his choices. I didn't run to him. I stood slowly, wiping dirt from my hands, heart pounding but calm. He took a hesitant step forward. "Hi, Mom." I blinked back, tears. "Hi, Daniel." His voice cracked. I wasn't sure if I should come. I gave him a half smile. "But you did." He nodded. "I came home." We stood in the garden for a long while. No grand speeches, no dramatic hugs, just being side by side, like the roots of an old tree that had nearly died but found water again. "I've been in Portugal," he said, "then Amsterdam, then Thailand, working, traveling, thinking." I figured. I whispered. "I was angry," he admitted, "not at you, at myself. I kept blaming you for being overprotective, for controlling me, but really, I was scared of growing up, scared of being responsible for my life." He paused. "I said horrible things, and you stopped being the mother I was used to. At first, I hated you for it, but later, I understood. I didn't stop being your mother," I said gently. "I just stopped carrying what wasn't mine to carry." Daniel looked down, ashamed. "I don't know if I deserve to come back." "You don't need to deserve love, Daniel," I said, walking toward him. "You just need to receive it." We stood close now, face to face. He held out his hand, tentative, fragile. I took it, not like a mother holding her child's hand, but like a woman accepting the hand of someone she loves, fully grown, fully changed. And finally home. That night, we sat by the fire, no TV, no phones, just stories and old laughter. He told me about the woman he met in Lisbon. Not Claire, someone new. About his work designing small eco-resorts and how it was inspired by my little herb garden. About how he cooked for himself now, and how he understood why I always kept my pantry full, just in case someone came home hungry. I didn't ask for details of why he stayed away so long. I didn't need to. Some things are better felt than said. Before heading to bed, he paused by the hallway. Mom, yes, love, thanks for letting me go. I smiled, and thank you, I said, for coming back. Being a mother is not just about raising a child. It's about learning when to hold on, and when to let go. And sometimes the greatest act of love is stepping back, just far enough so they can see you clearly. He left as my son. He returned as a man, but in my heart, I had never stopped being his mother. Not for a single second. Sometimes healing comes not in reunion, but in remembering who you were before the pain began. After Daniel returned and life found its rhythm again, slower, quieter, I began sifting through old boxes in the attic, not because I was looking for anything specific, but because I felt something inside me shifting, like it was time to dust off the things I'd buried. Among the old photographs and yellowed report cards, I found a letter. UNSENT. Unfolded. Unfinished. It was written in my handwriting, softer, more uncertain than I remembered. Dated nearly a year after Daniel had left. The ink had faded, but I could still read every word like I had just written it yesterday. Dear Daniel, today, I bought a bottle of your favorite shampoo. I don't know why, force of habit, I suppose. Or maybe a mother's stubborn hope. I made your favorite soup this week too. It sat on the stove until midnight, waiting. I didn't eat it. It didn't taste right without your complaints about the carrots being too soft. I miss your voice. Even when it was loud, even when it was angry, and if you're wondering, yes, I'm angry too, but not at you, at time, at life, at how quickly everything can change with one sentence. Stop treating me like a child. I want to tell you something I didn't say before you walked out. Being your mother is the greatest thing I've ever done, not because I did it perfectly, God knows I didn't, but because I did it with all my heart. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every burned birthday cake. It was love. If you come back, I'll be here. If you don't, I'll still be here, loving you. Always, Mom. I held that letter against my chest and wept. Not for the pain we'd been through, but for the woman I was when I wrote those words. Lonely, uncertain, but still overflowing with a love that couldn't be silenced, even by distance. That letter never made it into the mailbox, but it had lived in my heart the entire time. And somehow, I think Daniel always felt it, even if he never read it. Later that evening, I showed him the letter. He sat on the porch swing, reading it slowly, eyes glistening. When he was done, he folded it carefully and looked at me. I think I felt this, he said, even when I was far away. I think that's why I couldn't stay gone forever. I smiled, tears catching in the corners of my eyes. Love has a way of traveling farther than we think. He nodded. Then gently placed the letter in his pocket. Time is a strange healer. It doesn't erase the past. It weaves it into us, softens it at the edges, makes room for new beginnings. Daniel and I, we're still learning each other again, not as mother and child, but as two people rebuilding trust one honest moment at a time. And me, I no longer wait by the door I live by. Garden, I write letters I may never send. Not out of sorrow, but because I finally understand. Love doesn't always need to be spoken to be heard. Sometimes the loudest love is the one that waits quietly, patiently, with an open heart, and an unsent letter in a box. It had been 7 years since Daniel stood at my doorstep. Eyes hollow with remorse and soul full of confusion. 7 years since we had stitched the delicate threads of our bond back together, one fragile conversation at a time. Now, I sat at a long banquet table, silverware clinking, candles flickering, and laughter dancing through the air like confetti. The hall was dressed in gold and navy, Daniel's favorite colors. Claire, ever the organizer, had arranged every detail down to the folded napkins with calligraphy names. It was Daniel's wedding. And I, somehow, had gone from the mother he once resented, to the woman seated at the head of his table, honored and glowing. The bride, Leela, was graceful and warm. She had taken my hand the first time we met and said, "I've heard so much about you." Good things, that was all she said, but the way she looked at Daniel told me everything I needed to know. As the dessert plates were cleared, Daniel stood slowly, clinking his glass with the back of his fork. The room quieted. He looked older, not in a tired way, but in a settled way. The boy who once screamed, "Stop treating me like a child," was now a man who knew the weight of his words. He cleared his throat. "I want to say something I've carried in my heart for a long time, and I think tonight is the right night to say it." He turned toward me, and I froze. "There was a time," he said, "when I believed that love meant control, that a mother's care was a cage I needed to escape, and I said something cruel to the woman who loved me more fiercely than I deserved." He paused, letting silence fill the room. "My mother," he said, voice trembling, "once stopped being my mother, not out of anger, not to punish me, but to protect herself, to teach me what real boundaries look like, and to let me grow without hurting her in the process." A lump caught in my throat. My hands trembled. "She let go," he continued, "so I could come back to her, not as a boy demanding freedom, but as a man ready to earn her trust again." He lifted his glass. "To my mother, Evelyn, the strongest, gentlest woman I've ever known. You didn't just raise me, you taught me how to come home." The room erupted in applause. Tears streamed down my face, and I felt Claire's hand slip into mine. Even she, my practical daughter, was dabbing her eyes with a napkin. As Daniel made his way to his bride, I caught his eye, and for a single second, we didn't need words. Everything had come full circle. Later that night, I stood by the window of my quiet room in the guest house, watching the newlyweds dance in the garden below. Soft music played, and fairy lights twinkled like stars descended just for them. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. "It was Claire." "Mom," she said, stepping in. "There's something I want to ask." I turned, curious. She rarely wore uncertainty on her face. "I've been thinking," she continued. "You have stories, a life full of them. You've raised kids, weathered storms, survived heartbreak, and found your strength again. Why don't you write them down?" I blinked. "Right, yes. For the women who feel invisible, for mothers who are told they're too much or not enough, for women like you." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to my desk and opened a drawer. Inside, still folded neatly, was the letter I never sent to Daniel. Maybe it was time. Maybe the world needed to hear our story. Maybe my story. We grow up believing we're here to raise our children, but sometimes they raise us right back. Sometimes we teach them when to let go, and sometimes we learn when to hold on. And if you're lucky, truly lucky, you live long enough to be seen not just as someone's mother, but as someone with her own story. I'm Jean. I've lived, I've lost, I've loved, and I'm still writing. I stood at the threshold of Daniel's old bedroom, the doorknob cool and familiar in my hand. The house was unusually quiet. No sounds of his voice echoing down the hallway, no slammed doors, no sarcastic remarks thrown over his shoulder, just silence, thick, solemn, and heavy. I hadn't stepped inside this room in weeks. After everything that had happened, after he said those 7 bitter words, "Stop treating me like a child," I had pulled back. And then, when he moved out, I let the room sit untouched. It became a shrine to a time I didn't fully understand and wasn't sure I wanted to revisit. But today, something in me stirred. Maybe it was the morning sun spilling through the windows, landing softly on the hardwood floors like an invitation. Or maybe it was the letter I'd found tucked into an old cookbook last night. Daniel's handwriting from years ago, a childish scrawl that read, "I love you, Mom, you're the best ever." I turned the knob and entered. Everything was frozen in time. His bookshelf still held old fantasy novels with cracked spines and dog-eared pages. A dusty PlayStation sat beside a tangled mess of wires. Posters of comic book heroes and vintage bands lined the walls, some edges curling with age. His bed was neatly made, a sharp contrast to the chaos that used to define this space. And on the desk, there it was, the photo of us. It was from his 8th grade graduation, my arm wrapped tightly around his shoulders. He was wearing an oversized navy blazer, and I was smiling so wide, I could see the love pouring from my eyes. I picked up the frame and traced his little face with my thumb. Where had that boy gone? The same boy who once asked me to sing him lullabies until he fell asleep. The same boy who clutched my hand on his first day of school. The same boy who, just last month, said I was suffocating him. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the weight of the memories sit with me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not like before. I was tired of guessing what was right. Tired of stepping on emotional landmines. Tired of trying to be everything he needed when I no longer knew what that was. Maybe that was the crux of it. I had spent so much of my life being his mother that I forgot how to be anything else. I forgot how to breathe when he wasn't in the room. I forgot how to let go when the world told me to hold on. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Elise. My best friend, coffee at Hazel's, you need a break, don't disappear again. I smiled faintly. Elise always knew when to step in just enough, not too much. I typed back a quick reply, on my way, but before I left the room, I grabbed something, a small, crumpled envelope from the drawer of his desk, addressed to me in Daniel's teenage handwriting. It must have been years old, the paper was yellowing at the edges. I hesitated, then opened it. Mom, if you ever find this, I hope we're still close. I know I act tough sometimes. I know I roll my eyes and pretend I don't care, but I do. I notice the way you stay up late worrying about me. I hear you when you whisper prayers at night. I know you love me, even when I don't say it back. I might mess up. I might hurt you. But please don't ever stop being my mom, even if I act like I don't want it. I do. Love. Daniel. The tears came before I could stop them. They spilled down my cheeks like something sacred had been released. I clutched the letter to my chest and whispered, "Oh, baby," he had written this. Before life grew more complicated. Before girlfriends and independence and bruised egos and angry words. Before the sting of "stop treating me like a child" became a wedge between us. But it was still there, proof that beneath all of it, love remained. At Hazel's cafe, Elise was already waiting. Two lattes in hand, she didn't say anything. When she saw my red-rimmed eyes, she just slid the coffee toward me and waited. "I went into his room today," I said softly. Elise raised an eyebrow. "And I found a letter he wrote me years ago. Said he knew I loved him even when he didn't say it back. Told me not to stop being his mom." "That sounds like Daniel," she said, her voice warm. "He's always been more heart than he lets on." I nodded. I think I needed to see it. I think I needed to remember that the boy I raised is still somewhere in the man he's becoming. We sat there in comfortable silence, sipping our drinks, watching the world go by. "Do you think he'll come back?" I finally asked. "Maybe not in the way you want," Elise said gently, "but in his own time, his own way. Yes, love like yours doesn't vanish, it just learns to breathe differently." That night, I didn't cry. I tucked the letter into a new frame and placed it beside my bed, not as a shrine, but as a reminder that motherhood doesn't end with a slammed door or harsh words. It doesn't disappear when they walk away, it evolves. It bends, it waits. I didn't stop being his mother that day he told me to. I just stopped trying to be the kind of mother he no longer needed. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something new between us. Something quieter, wiser, and built not on control, but mutual understanding. It's been 11 months. 11 months since that conversation in the hallway. 11 months since he looked me in the eye and said, "Stop treating me like a child." And 11 months since I stopped being the mother I used to be. So much has changed, and not in loud, dramatic ways, but in small, quiet ripples, like the slow unfurling of a flower that's learning how to bloom again in different sunlight. Daniel calls now, not every day, not even every week, but when he does, there's no edge in his voice, no sharpness, just space. Space for laughter, for silence, for me. Last month, he invited me to his apartment, cooked dinner pasta with too much garlic, and played me his favorite new record. We didn't talk about the past, we didn't need to. It was in the way he poured my wine, the way he asked if I was sleeping okay, the way he leaned in when I told him a story from my own youth, as if I weren't just his mother, but a person worth listening to. That was new. And then, just before I left that night, he pressed a small envelope into my hand, said, "Don't open it here, read it when you're home." I waited until the house was still, made a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table in my robe like I used to when he was little, listening for trouble in the quiet. The letter was short. Mom, I didn't understand then how much you gave up for me. I do now. I know I said some things that hurt you. I was trying to find my own footing and mistook your care for control. But I see now, you were always holding the rope, even when I was pulling away. Thank you for letting me go without letting me fall. I love you, Daniel. I didn't cry. I just sat there, smiling at nothing. The kind of smile that only comes after a long storm finally passes. I never needed him to be perfect. I only ever needed him to come back, not to the house. Not even to me but to himself. And I think he has. You see, motherhood doesn't end the day they walk out. It evolves, it stretches, it breaks and repairs itself, and sometimes, it quietly steps back so they can rise. I still keep that first letter of his, the one I found in his old desk, and I've placed this new one beside it. Not as proof of the pain, but of the journey. One letter from a boy who needed me, and one from a man who finally saw me. That's enough. That's more than enough. It's more than enough.